to the AFC North battle between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. The Browns beat the Bengals 32-13. For the Bengals, Joe Burrow, he went 25 of 35. He threw for 232 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. For the Browns, Jacoby Brissett, he had an outstanding performance. He went 17 of 22. He threw for 278 passing yards, 1 touchdown. Nick Chubb, he had 23 carries, 101 rushing yards, 1 touchdown. And Joe Burrow fell to 0-4 against the Cleveland Browns. And so I watched this game last night from start to finish. My son wanted to go trick or treating early, and we went trick or treating, got our trick or treating out the way, and we got a chance to go in the house and watch some football. And I watched this game from start to finish. And my biggest takeaway from this game was the dominance by the Cleveland Browns against that Bengals front seven. In this game, the Browns, they had 172 rushing yards, and I thought Nick Chubb was the player of the game. Now, Jacoby Brissett had a great performance as well. He had some terrific passes down the field to Amari Cooper, but I thought Nick Chubb was the most valuable player in this game. And the Bengals front seven, they had no answers for Nick Chubb in this game. We know the Bengals are led by defensive coordinator Lou Admiral. And coming into this game, remember, in the first 7 games of the season, the Bengals defensively, they hadn't given up a second half touchdown all season. That Bengals defense was playing at a high level, and I even had to give them credit. I said, damn, Bengals ain't gave up a second half touchdown all season long. That's impressive. It was a complete opposite in this week 8 game against the Cleveland Browns. I thought the Browns completely dominated the Bengals in the second and in the third quarter. In the second and the third quarter, the Browns outscored the Bengals 25-0. And in the first half, the Bengals, that defense, they did a pretty good job at containing that Browns rushing attack. But in the second half, they wore down. They wore down in the second half, and they didn't have Eli Apple coming into the game. They lost Abazuki, their defensive back. He's gone for the season. He tore his ACL. That's unfortunate for him. They lost him in this game. So they were thin in the secondary. They were thin. And I thought Amari Cooper took advantage of it. Amari Cooper for this game, 5 receptions, 131 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. I thought he was a great addition in their offense to what Nick Chubb was giving them. I thought Amari Cooper played a great game overall. And this is the Bengals type of game where you would think that Joe Burrow, with the weapons that he has on the outside, even without Jamar Chase, because a lot of Bengal fans are trying to say, oh my God, we didn't have Jamar Chase last night. Let me be very, very clear. Even if the Bengals had Jamar Chase last night, the Bengals would have lost this game to the Cleveland Browns. Jamar Chase can't play defensive tackle. He can't play defensive end. The Bengals couldn't stop the run, and they couldn't protect Joe Burrow. That's the main 2 reasons why they lost this game. The Browns had 5 sacks in this game, and I thought the key play in this game was Myles Garrett on the first drive. Myles Garrett was disruptive. He was tipping passes from Joe Burrow, creating opportunities for other defenders to come and intercept the football. I thought Myles Garrett did an outstanding job setting the tone for the Browns defense. And shout out to Myles Garrett, because Myles Garrett got into a horrific car accident a few weeks ago. And I saw the pictures from that car accident. He is blessed that he was able to walk away from that car accident, him and whoever he was with. So shout out to Myles Garrett, man. I'm glad he's back playing football, back on the field. Myles Garrett is one of the best defensive players we have in the NFL. I know everyone wants to talk about Micah Parsons, and rightfully so. I like Micah Parsons. He's a stud defensively for the Dallas Cowboys. But Myles Garrett has been doing it at a much longer pace than Micah Parsons has. He's been playing at a high level longer than Parsons has overall. So I thought he was the biggest difference in the game, and he had a major impact on the Browns defensively. Now, for whatever reason, the Bengals offensive line, they have not figured out how to protect Joe Burrow. This is the Bengals offensive line this season. They've allowed 30 sacks. That's the second most in the NFL. On their pass block win rate, they only win on 48%. That's ranked 30th in the NFL. Joe Burrow has 2.6 average seconds to throw. That's the fourth fastest in the NFL. So once again, the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line cannot protect their star quarterback. Because I believe Joe Burrow, when he's at his best, is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But you can't be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL if you're always on your back. That's the biggest issue right now with the Cincinnati Bengals. They cannot protect Joe Burrow. This Bengals offensive line, I'm calling all of you out tonight on the show. Center Ted Karras, who they signed in free agency. Right guard Alex Kappa. Right tackle Lyle Collins. He's been a shell of himself. Left tackle Jonah Williams. Cordell Volson. This offensive line for the Bengals has been terrible in the first 8 weeks of the season. They've been terrible. And for whatever reason, Zach Taylor hasn't figured out that he doesn't have a good offensive line. Forget about being a great offensive line. Zach Taylor, newsflash, you don't even have an average offensive line. Your offensive line is a below average offensive line. Change up your schemes. Change up what you're doing. Get a running back like Joe Mixon or Hurst to chip. You can't have all these receivers going out into the passing lanes to catch passes, and your 5 offensive linemen cannot win their blocking assignments. When is Zach Taylor going to understand this? I'm not even a Bengals fan, and I'm watching these games and seeing how the Bengals have to change up what they're doing offensively and have an extra player who can help them with their blocking assignments because they can't win one-on-one matchups up front. That was the biggest difference last night in the game. The Browns' defensive line dominated the Bengals' offensive line. That's why the Bengals lost this game. And it had nothing to do with Jamar Chase. It had nothing to do with Jamar Chase not playing in this game. Because even if Jamar Chase played in this game, Joe Burrow would not have had time to deliver him the football down the field. That's the issue right now. Because Jamar Chase is off the field, though, now the Bengals' offensive line, they have to hold their blocks longer so routes can develop down the field. And their offensive line can't do it. They cannot do it to save their lives. That's the biggest issue right now with the Bengals. They got elite weapons in Chase, in Higgins, in Boyd, but they don't have time to get into their routes because Joe Burrow is on his back. That's the issue with the Bengals right now. Their offensive line, they thought they had addressed that in the offseason, but their offensive line this year may be worse than it was last year. Remember last year, Joe Burrow got sacked a league high 51 times. He got sacked over 20 times in the playoffs last year, 7 times in the Super Bowl. So this is an ongoing issue for the Cincinnati Bengals offensively. They can't protect Joe Burrow. And I thought about something else last night as I was watching the game. I know Bengals fans don't want to hear this, but it was reports before Joe Burrow got drafted by the Bengals. There are reports about how if Joe Burrow, if he wasn't from Ohio, he wouldn't have wanted to go and play in Cincinnati. They were talking about he didn't want to go to Cincinnati and play, but him being from Ohio, he wanted to be close to home. He accepted it. But they were talking about how Joe Burrow, he didn't want to come to Cincinnati and play for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I was thinking about Andrew Luck, and we witnessed Andrew Luck retire sooner than what we expected. Andrew Luck had at least 10 more years of playing quarterback in the NFL. And Andrew Luck decided to retire literally out of nowhere. Why did Andrew Luck retire? He retired because Jim Irsay And the Colts organization did not put an offensive line in front of him to protect him, and he took way too many hits. That's exactly what's going on right now with Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. If Zach Taylor and Mike Brown do not address this offensive line with Joe Burrow may decide that he doesn't want to sign a second contract, and he may depart Cincinnati. It may happen. So that's why I think it's very, very important for the Bengals organization to figure out the best possible 5 linemen who they can put in front of Joe Burrow and protect their investment. Because if they don't protect their investment, they can find themselves in the same position as the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts ain't been the same since Andrew Luck retired. They've had Carson Wentz, Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan. They've been searching for a quarterback since Andrew Luck retired. If the Bengals don't protect Joe Burrow, they could possibly be in the same situation as the Indianapolis Colts. They better go and protect this brother. I love Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow is one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL. He's as good as Josh Allen. He's as good as Justin Herbert. But if he's not protected and he's on his backside, you can't even see Joe Burrow fling that football down the field the way that we know he can. Everybody want to blame Joe Mixon and say Joe Mixon not the same running back this season than what he was in previous years. Maybe Joe Mixon isn't having a great season. I still believe Joe Mixon is a top 10 running back at his best in the NFL. I don't believe Joe Mixon forgot how to play running back all of a sudden. I still think Joe Mixon is a running back who you can hand a football off to, and he can give you production in the running game. Now, in this matchup, Mixon had only 8 carries for 27 rushing yards. So he was ineffective in this game. But remember, the Bengals at one point in this game, they were down 25-0. So the running game was irrelevant at that point. You got to pass the football with Joe Burrow. So again, man, they got to figure out a way to protect Joe Burrow, man, and do a better job at being able to get receivers open down the field. Receivers have no time to get open because Joe Burrow's getting sacked and on his backside. Let's look at the Bengals offense last night. They had 13 points last night. That season rank is worse for them. Their point differential was minus 19. That was the worst for them this season. They had 229 yards of offense. That was the worst of the season. 15 total first downs, worst of the season. 36 rushing yards, worst of the season. So they can't figure out how to beat the Cleveland Browns, and they can't figure out how to protect Joe Burrow. You look at that Browns defensive line. They got Myles Garrett up front. They got Jadeveon Clowney as well. And in this game, it was a bunch of players who contributed to the Browns defense. Myles Garrett had 1.5 sacks. Tevin Bryant had a half a sack. Sion Tayaki had a sack as well. So that Browns defensive line was impressive. Now, the key for the Browns is going to be, how is this team going to perform once Deshaun Watson returns back to the field? They said he's going to come back in week 13, I believe. So he's going to be the starting quarterback for the Browns the rest of the season. Remember, Deshaun Watson hasn't played in 2 years. He hasn't played in almost 2 years. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Browns can still be in the hunt once Deshaun Watson returns back to the lineup. He's going to be rusty. He ain't played in 2 years. He's going to be rusty. It's going to be interesting to see. But like I said, man, I think this game, it was the Bengals offensive line got dominated by the Browns defensive line, and the Browns offensive line outperformed the Bengals defensive line.